Hey, what's up? I'm Michael Sorrentino, and today I'm going to be showing you exactly how I master my song Blindsight using 4 basic mastering concepts. I'm also going to show you don't have to do anything too complicated to get good results. Those 4 concepts are parallel compression, EQ, saturation, and achieving loudness. So getting right into it, I've got my session open here, and you can see there really isn't a whole lot that I'm doing here. So right off the rip, I'm going to turn off all these plugins. The first thing I did was kind of analyze the starting point of this mix, and I did mix this, so I made sure to take at least like a day or two in between the mixing session and the mastering session. That way my ears can sort of reset. That's tip number 1. So I'm gonna play the mix kind of starting at like the chorus area. Okay, I did leave a little bit of headroom, not a whole lot, honestly. I probably could have left more, which most people would probably recommend. I think the mix sounds pretty good, but I think it needs more power, a little more filler, if you know what I mean. So the first thing I did was parallel compression. I didn't even really mess with anything on the actual track here. So I sent 100% of the mix to this parallel compression aux or parallel compression bus. What I've got going on is just the ozone dynamic thing. And you can see here, these are the settings. And I've got a relatively low ratio with a, I don't know if that's quick. I don't know if you would consider that quick, but 10 millisecond attack. But I've kind of got a slow release. The purpose of the slow release was to bring up the overall volume and kind of bring up the more quiet details. Some would say to just compress it normally, but I already had a bus compressor on the mix session, so I don't want to go too hard. And I kind of have a low threshold for the compressor. So I'm going to solo the actual compression so you can hear what it's doing. And I'm going to bring it up because it's really quiet in the mix. So you can see I'm hovering around like 7 or 8 dB of gain reduction pretty much the entire time. I'm going to slowly bring in this parallel compression into the mix to where I had it before. Very subtle. Mastering is not about redoing the entire mix. Let's just see what it would sound like if I just pushed it even more. I probably could have, but I didn't find it necessary. Yeah, it's way too much. Next thing, I'm sending the track to bus 3, which is the main sub, which is where I'm doing most of my processing. And this has a couple benefits. Whatever you do on the track will also get implemented into the parallel compression. And I wanted to control that, I guess, independently. So I find it easier to just send everything to another bus. I actually did not even do any EQ here. Again, this is sort of a template thing. I don't use linear EQ all the time, but I did the Gullfoss mastering. The Gullfoss master EQ is kind of like a smart EQ. Really good. I'm going to turn it on and turn it off. Really subtle here. I got 3% on recovery, 2.6 on the tame, and really the things I noticed it doing are kind of bringing up this high end a little bit. I think overall it sounds more controlled just in the slightest bit. You'll notice that I have it not doing anything under 140 hertz because in my experience, I think it does too much in the low end most of the time. So I usually just opt to leave that out. I think it takes the impact away from the low end whenever I have it pushed all the way out here. So I usually just don't. All right, next up, I went into saturation at this stage. So a new plugin that I got that I'm actually really into is the Spectre. It's a additive sort of saturation plugin. You've got different types of saturation here. They all have different sounds. They all sound really good for various things. There are some that are a little more crazy that you don't want to use on mastering, but they would be cool in other places. So here's with it off at this stage. I think that actually adds a lot. It carries a lot of the weight. So I'm gonna bring this all the way up so you can hear just the saturation that it's adding. So 0% is just the mix, 50% is obviously both, which is pretty much where you want this. If anything above 50% is essentially taking away from the mix. So I'm just gonna keep it at 50. Because like I said, this is just the saturation here. Let's mess around with these just to see, it gives you the full effect here. So here at 80 Hertz, it's adding a little bit more body. And this 560 Hertz, you just need a little bit more in the guitars. You can hear almost immediately when I turn that on, the guitars just, they feel like they pop out of the speakers a little bit more. They just feel more in your face. One thing to note that this isn't just affecting this frequency because the Q is pretty wide. And there, it adds a little life. Without this, it sounded dull, and I didn't do anything to the very upper end because I didn't want to overcook it. I used ozone for a few different things here. First thing I did was some subtle EQ, and you can see I'm hardly even using it. It's like 28% for the amount. And the moves I got here, I got cutting a little bit at 2K, boosting some at 7K, and boosting a little bit at 14 or 15. So let's turn this off and on. I'm gonna turn all these off. Again, this is kind of just bringing a little bit more life into the So this is really just bringing a little life to the high end. All right, for impact, let's see what I got going on here. This is also pretty subtle in the mix. I got a 16th note sync for the attack and release settings, kind of expanding the low end just a tiny bit. And you can see here what compressing it subtly between the different bands. This one's pretty much just taming the cymbal hits that go a little too crazy. So next on the imaging, I've got stereo widening. I'm narrowing the bass frequencies just to kind of bring it in a little bit. We got really subtle here. Makes it the slightest bit wider, a little bit bigger. Clarity. I actually really like this part of ozone. It does what it says, makes it more clear. This is kind of like a tone adjustment, brighter up here, darker down here. And I have pretty aggressive settings for attack and release just to make it not super noticeable. And then we got some more EQ up here, kind of cutting out some specific frequencies. A little bit at 1K, 3.8, and a little shelf here. So let's see what they're doing. A little annoying there, not too bad. This one probably sucks. That's like a hiss that I heard. I really didn't like that hissing sound. Again, just leveling it out. All right, moving on. Going from ozone, I'm just going into a neutron equalizer. Again, more EQ. Probably the biggest part of mastering. I'm boosting a little bit at 300. I did this for the guitars mainly and for the bass, just to give everything a little bit more solidity. Got 800 boosting, probably also for guitar stuff. Then I'm dipping at 3.7, really similar to the dynamic EQ. And I got 11.3. Just taming some cymbals. Now we're getting into the loudness section. And the secret, which isn't really a secret, is to use multiple limiters and clippers. So the two that I use are Flatline 2 and Ozone Maximizer. So this first one of Flatline, these are the settings. I've got 40, 40 for attack and release. I've got a 0.16 millisecond look ahead, no channel linking, no color. I set the ceiling at -0.1, and I'm doing like almost 2 decibels. This also increases the volume when you crank it. And you can see I'm only doing a couple decibels of gain reduction. Some would say that's a lot, some would say it's not enough. But I think anything after a couple, you can start hearing what the limiting and the clipping is doing. What I mean by that is if they can hear what you're doing, then you're doing too much. Okay, moving on to the next iteration of Flatline. It's literally the same thing. Okay. I'm also doing 8 times oversampling on this just to prevent aliasing. And then moving on to the Ozone Maximizer. Nothing super crazy. I'm only doing about 1.5 decibels. Output -0.1. I'm not doing true peak limiting because I think it feels too boxy. I've got IRC Modern. I've got very fast for the character. That's it, nothing else on this one. After all that, I just kind of looked at some metering, got the loudness meter up, and then I've got Insight 2, which gives some good info. You know, this is a loud master, but that was the goal. I wanted it to be loud. I wanted it to be in your face. If you look at any popular music right now, they're all pushing numbers way higher than that. So that's why I'm not too worried about the true peak thing, because most people don't care about that either. And that's how I master Blindsight. So you can see everything I've done is not very complicated. I do want to make an honorable mention for something that's helped out my mastering a lot, and that's the ARC Studio. If you're not familiar, it's a little box unit that you hook up in between your speakers that gives you like a room EQ correction system. And let me know if you want to see a video on the ARC Studio. I'm actually really happy with it. So I would love to hear any suggestions that you have or what your sort of mastering process is. Also, let me know your favorite mastering plugins for EQ, compression, saturation, all that good stuff. Check out my music on Apple Music, Spotify, Bandcamp, Tidal, all that good stuff. I appreciate you watching. See you next time.